Hey guys, welcome to my ultimate Kitone review. In this review, I'll be discussing her builds, my recommended Espers and vision cards, her skills, team comps, and PvP operation. You may have noticed that I color-coded the topics. I'm going to put a colored bar on the top right of the video, and hopefully that will help people who are just scanning through the video to get to the topics that they're most interested in quickly. But before I start, let me say a few things about myself and why I think I'm qualified to review Kitone and talk about this game. I'm a longtime fan of strategy games. It's my favorite genre. I'm also a competitive TCG player, but since the global pandemic has started, lockdown rules in my country have been very strict, and any gathering to play recreational games are banned. I started playing the game when it first came out, and currently I have all the available URL units on Global at level 99, except for Thancred, Gilgamesh, Rob, and Mashery. So I plan to have a review series of all level 99 UR units that I have, and some MRs and SR units as well. Another thing I'd like to mention is that English isn't my first language, and if you find it weird that I talk slow or there are weird cuts in the video, that's because I'm taking my time to try and think about what I'm going to say. Let's begin. So why is Kitone so good? Well, first, she is the best counter that we have right now in the game for two very popular units, Orlando and Frederica. Orlando is probably the most popular unit in the game. Second, evasion teams are very strong, and that is right up Kitone's alley. She is currently the best evasion unit in the game, but they're pretty rare because they're difficult to build. It's an off-meta pick right now, so there aren't many teams that are geared specifically to counter it. Third, she's very flexible and she's very unique. She can be played as, of course, an evasion unit, but also as a non-evasive unit that's just a good DPS unit. And her arsenal is varied enough that she can take care of both squishy units and also tanky units. Finally, she's very good in PvE. She's fast and very mobile, and she gets to places faster than most other units. A lot of the mobs in the game, even at the highest difficulty, are not accurate enough to hit her, so she is able to farm very quickly. After all that praise, is Kitone the perfect unit? Well, the answer is no, because no unit is perfect, and she is countered by another very popular unit in the game, named Lucia. Another thing is that evade teams are expensive to build. Expensive in a sense that it requires very specific resources. And since this is a digital gacha game, unlike real-world TCGs where you can trade cards with players, it's sometimes very difficult to get the pieces that you want to be able to build an evasion team. And lastly, even though she has a shuriken attack which has formidable range, a lot of her top-end attacks have very low range, and she needs to be able to close the gap with the enemy to be able to do real damage. So Kitone is main job ninja, and she has three main viable builds. One is just straight up ninja. The second is a soldier with a lot of her slashing abilities. And the third is also a soldier, but focusing on the drain force ability. As a ninja main, her notable skills that she will always have access to are Shuriken, a long range, low cost attack, Utsusemi, a self buff that gives her insane evasion, Dream within a Dream, an attack that lets you start slash chains, and Shadowbind, an attack that damages the unit and also has a chance to inflict the stop status effect. First, I want to talk about Utsusemi. So, fun fact, in Japanese this refers to a cicada shell. A cicada is an insect that shows up a lot during the summertime in Japan. So it appears in a lot of anime and is used to establish scenes that are in the summertime. Utsusemi increases your evasion by a lot. If you can see the picture on the right, this is before Utsusemi. Orlando has a 42% chance to hit Kitone. After Utsusemi has a 0% chance. Now let's talk about choosing Ninja Sub for Kitone. When you're in the Ninja Sub playing on auto and she doesn't have any party buffs from TMRs, her priority buff will be Decider of Fate. Decider of Fate is an okay skill. It raises your accuracy for 1 turn and gives you guaranteed critical hit. The TP cost is pretty low, which isn't a good thing because it doesn't give you a lot of AP. Her notable AP skills as a Ninja Sub are Doton and Shadowbind. Doton is interesting because it's an attack that doesn't have any attack type. So if a unit has high slash resistance, for example, it's not going to have a negative effect on Doton. Shadowbind is also interesting. It gives you a chance to inflict stop on the enemy unit based on how much fate you have and also how much fate the target unit has. So given that, a frequently asked question about Kitone is whether you should raise her faith or not. The answer is yes. In most cases, you'll want her to have high faith. It affects a lot of her skills like the 2 Shadowbinds that she has, and also the success rate of her slow counter reaction skill. Next up, we're taking a look at the first out of the 2 builds that utilize the Soldier subclass. So the Soldier subclass gives you access to Hazard Form and Hazard Spin. Hazard Form is a self-buff that gives you a lot of attack. On the right, I have some screenshots that show you how much that attack increase affects your damage. So Shuriken after Hazard Form gains 13% damage, and Hazard Spin here around 14%. But that mostly depends on what equipment and cards you have and who you're targeting. In this example, I'm targeting Orlando, who has a natural weakness against Earth element. Aside from Shuriken, Kitone will mostly also use these 2 attacks if she is able to build enough AP. The Hazard Spin, you've already seen, is very powerful. The downside to Hazard Spin is that its AP cost is 38, which is quite high. And its range height is 0, so you literally have to be breathing the same air as your target to be able to execute it. On the other hand, we have Hard Slash here. It's very cheap at only 17 AP, and it also hits quite hard. You can use it 4 times and it has a range height of 1. So the difference is that this hits for medium damage and is a single target attack. And the last build that we're going to talk about is the Drain Force build. Drain Force is a skill that is already available to you once you switch to the Soldier subclass. However, it scales using your max HP. So to build Kitone to maximize the damage that you can do with Drain Force, you have to raise her HP. Let's take a look at what it does. So as you can see, it hits for an okay amount of damage, but it also absorbs that damage and heals Kitone. So why would you want to use Drain Force? Well, as you can see here, it has no damage type, so it's very similar to Doton. So when you're faced with very tanky units like this Engelbert here, as you can see, my Hazard Spin only does 375 damage to him because of his very high slash resistance. Drain Force, on the other hand, will do a lot more damage. So when the patch comes, when you can turn off your skills on auto, some people turn off everything except Drain Force. That's not a bad idea, because as the game progresses, a lot of players will stack up on slash resistance because it's the most common attack type in the game or damage type in the game. But it's also very risky because, as you can see here, Drain Force range height is only 0. That means you have to be completely level with your target in order to use it. However, you can use it 5 times, which is good. and it only costs 20 AP. So before we end the topic of builds, let me answer another set of FAQs. Should you max out Saiga Shadowbind, which is Kitone's limit burst? As I said earlier, you should really be trying to build Kitone with high faith. And if you do that, you will find that Saiga Shadowbind already has a very high chance of inflicting stop. So what you're doing when you're raising its level is you're only really doing it to raise the damage, which I wouldn't say is the best use of your limit burst pots. But if you have nothing else to raise, then yeah, why not? Sure. But only max it if you have nothing else good to max out. Related to that is, should you max out Kitone's TMR skill? I don't really think that you should be using her TMR because you can get a lot of evasion from just armor. And right now in global, evasion doesn't stack, but it might be worth it when we cut the update where the stats already stack. But even so, I don't think it's worth it to max out the TMR skill. Now let's take a look at recommended Espers for Kitone. If you're looking to build her as a ninja or a slasher, hands down the best Esper for you will be Odin. I have here two examples of a maxed out Odin built on the right and a level 60 build on the left, just to give you an idea of the progression. You'll want to get Man-Eater and attack with evasion first, and then work your way towards slash attack. If you don't have Odin, these are other ideas of Espers that you can give her. Petra on the far left has enough wind resistance to offset her disadvantage to Lucia, and it also gives a ton of evasion. The problem I see with that is that the last points you'll need to spend will be a bit awkward. In this example, I chose to get Earth Eater for my last points. In the middle you have Iron Giant, which is pretty much the same as Behemoth on the far right, giving lots of attack and slash bonuses. The main difference between them is that Iron Giant is a more defensive option with slash resist, while when building Behemoth to the right, you have the option to go for Light Eater, which will give you bonus damage against popular light element tanks like Engelbert and the upcoming Warrior of Light. And finally, if you're going for a pure Drain Force build, Golem will be an excellent choice. You can go for defense to tank more hits, and go for Man-Eater to increase your Drain Force damage and self-heal. And of course you can also always go for Odin, just leave out the slash attack in favor of slash resistance. Next up we have vision cards. So these are the vision cards that you should be using on Kitone, and some of the vision cards that I'm going to be discussing here are not necessarily vision cards that you want to put on Kitone, but maybe on a party member to help the overall composition of the team. So first we have Secrets of the Heart. This gives a self buff of plus 10 earth attack, so you will want this on Kitone, and party buff of 35% luck. So for those who didn't know, every 2.5 points of luck is approximately equivalent to 1% of dodge chance. Next we have Secret Orders. This gives plus 10% agi to the holder, so this is also useful for Kitone. Every 2 points of agi is approximately equivalent to a percentage of evasion, and also it gives a party buff of plus 20 slash attack. So if you have a party full of slash attackers, this is going to be pretty useful. Next we have Vow of Love. So everyone should already be familiar with this card. It gives you hate, so it's useful for tanking. So this gives you aggro when you're going up against AI enemies, either in arena or PvE. And it gives a party buff of plus 30% attack. So this card is useful for tanks, and since Kitone has such high evasion, she can also do a good job at tanking. Not to mention that she's very fast and mobile, and is able to position herself in front of your attacking team. Next is Birth of a New Life. So this card is a very good card to have if you're going for the Drain Force build. It gives you additional HP, 8%, and a party buff of 21% luck. So evasion HP, that's very good. And here are some utility cards that you can either choose to equip on Kitone or some other team members. Here we have Shiva. It gives 10 Ice Rest, but that's not what you're really equipping the card for. What you're after is the party buff of 20 Evade. Next we have Odin, which is also a really good card for a Drain Force build because it gives you 10 Man-Eater. That will increase your Drain Force damage and also your self-heal, while giving you 20 unit resistance. So this is 20 resistance for single target attacks of any element or type. That's very good for a Drain Force build. And here we have Cleansing the Mind, which gives you 15% luck, so that gives you more evasion, and then a party buff of 15 missile resistance. So you're going to want to equip this card if you're going up against teams with 2 or 3 gunners. And special mention is the Iron Giant card. So this card gives you 20 slash attack, which is good, but it also deducts 3% from your agi. Now this is not always a bad thing. There are certain situations where having more agi puts you at a disadvantage. For example, in the current arena map where there's a cliff in the middle, if a unit goes down that cliff first and they don't have any ranged attacks that reach up to 2 height, then they're going to be at a disadvantage because the opponent units will go down and have the first opportunity to attack. But this card also gives a party buff of 15 slash rest, which is pretty good if you're going up against a slash team, and there are many slash teams running around. Okay, lastly, for vision cards, these are cards that haven't released in Global yet, but they don't have the official English names yet, but I decided to put them here because they're going to be relevant for Kitone users in the future. The first one is translated as False Chances by Google Translate, and it gives a self buff of 15 slash attack and a party buff of 10 evade. So this is like a weaker version of Shiva, but the good thing about it is that it gives you the flexibility to run an all-physical team, which is something that you might want to do. Next we have Fenrir. This one gives you a self buff of 10% HP, so this is good for a Drain Force build, and it gives you a party buff of 20 magic rests. As the game progresses, there are going to be inevitably more and more magic units that are going to be released that are very strong, and this card gives you a good future-proofing option for Kitone. Next, we're going to quickly talk about skill setups. Personally, I like running Kitone as a soldier, and I just changed her vision card and Esper to entice the AI to either go with Drain Force or her slash attacks. So when farming, I have her running Shadow Runner and Shukuchi. This gives her maximum speed and mobility, which is good for farming faster. I don't use self-sacrifice when farming because usually you are going to be farming units that you can kill in one shot anyway. Arena is very difficult to explain because it's very situational. And like I said, Kitone is a very flexible character, and you have a lot of options to choose from depending on who you're up against and what map you're playing. But I typically use self-sacrifice instead of Shukuchi, except for situations wherein I need the extra mobility from Shukuchi in certain maps, or if I want to entice the AI to use Drain Force. Then since my Kitone build has max faith, I use slow counter instead of counter slash when in arena. Sometimes you'll want to use counter slash when you're up against teams that have 2 tanks or teams with not a lot of range. And at times when I'm going up against a strong tank and the arena map has uneven terrain, I'm going to switch to Ninja to get access to Doton. Doton has higher range height and will work better in those cases. Match PvP is pretty much the same, except there's a very strong preference for agi, so you will never want to switch off Shadowrunner here. You might still want to use Shukuchi instead of self-sacrifice if you're going to be using Drain Force, And there are certain maps where you may want to use Ninja to get access to Doton. I also never use Counter Slash in match PvP because a lot of the good players will know how to play around it. And just a quick note about the changes to the recommended vision cards. Valve Love is going to be kind of useless here unless you really want it for the attack percentage. And the Ramza card or Secret Orders are highly viable in this mode. And finally, for high difficulty content or missions that you can't finish just by leaving your phone on auto, I highly recommend that you use Kitone's Soldier subclass to get access to Hazard Slash. This will be very useful for dealing a lot of damage on multiple enemies at once. And depending on the map and how much mobility you need, you may want to switch out Shadowrunner for Shokuchi. Now on to my favorite topic, which is team compositions. Before I start discussing specific team compositions with Kitone, first I want to introduce the topic of complementary elements. The concept is simple enough. Ignore the light and dark elements for a while. These elements that are one space apart will cover each other's weaknesses. So when you're thinking about trying to build a balanced team composition, you should really consider trying to spread your elements one space apart. Light and dark doesn't matter much because they counter each other. There's also the mechanic of elemental chaining in this game, so it might be a viable strategy to stack elements. This concept doesn't matter much for Ultra Whales because they can mostly just overpower their opponents with their stronger units. But if you're someone who doesn't want to pull on every banner, this is something that you should consider when thinking about investing in a new unit. These are common team archetypes that you will see running around in the wild right now. And though Kitone will work in many of these teams, I will choose to focus on discussing only 3 of them. I'm probably going to make a separate video discussing each of these team archetypes and what team archetype beats what. Here I want to discuss the anatomy of a good evasion team. First you need a Shiva holder, and then an evasion tank. This is where Kitone comes in. And then a samurai for the illusion buff. When working with other units that have good evasion like Shadowlings, you can opt to use Secrets of the Heart card on Kitone. Otherwise, you might also consider using Vow of Love. If you look at our element map here, it's Kitone and a light and dark element, so that checks out. Ideally, you want the Shiva holder to benefit from the magic bonus that the card gives. So on the lower left are other examples of balanced team compositions that adhere to this concept. On the right are examples of team compositions that are also strong, but break the rules. This is because we're discussing 2 units that greatly affect the mechanics of the game, Orlando and Ayaka. I think everyone would agree that Orlando is a very strong unit, and he breaks the rules by having a very cheap attack that bypasses defense, while also having insane stats. And Ayaka with full life and Kuraga is really beneficial to any team. Another thing is Ayaka does a good job at hanging back and is in less of a danger of being mauled by an ice unit. However, do note that if you ever face a team with this composition that also breaks the rules, you probably have no chance of winning. In talking about Ayaka and how she breaks the rules of complementary elements when creating a team, I actually used this team composition in guild battles for my defense party. And as you can see, I have had good success with it. There was even an instance where I defended 12 times in one guild battle. On the lower left is the current team composition I use for the Wastelands arena map. Even though there are a lot of Lucias in arena, I still managed to stay in the top 100 with my Kitone. This is mainly because I am using an ice unit to cover Kitone's weaknesses. That's an example of how powerful the concept of complementary elements is. This composition will have a very high chance of defeating this type of composition, which you will see a lot in the arena. And by switching the order, I can easily defeat these types of team compositions, which are also very common in Arena. I'd also like to mention that you can use Victoria to some level of success, but I like using Narshe because she protects Kitone better with Vow of Love. And finally, for this section, I just want to quickly take a look at some near future team compositions where Kitone will also fit in. On the left side, we have some compositions featuring Venera, which will also be a very good evasion unit. And on the lower left will be a team composition that I'm excited to try when Warrior of Light comes out. On the right side are some examples of viable team compositions that adhere to the concepts that we've talked about so far. I'm really excited to test Fravia as a Shiva holder and how that will work in a Kitone team. Last topic I'm going to cover is match PvP, or some people call it as live PvP. This is the team composition that I mostly use in match PvP. It's very fun to play, and it's what you would call in the TCG world as an aggro deck. In my specific setup, I am able to boost Shadow Lynx's Agi with secret orders and equipment so that she goes before Kitone. That lets me use the illusion buff on the first turn and be aggressive with Kitone. This is an example of an aggressive initial placement that will work well with this composition. The units will gain Agi from their resonance with each other, and Shadow Lynx can use her illusion buff on the first turn, allowing Kitone to be aggressive on her turn. If you can't be bothered with initial placements, the default placement will also work, as long as you can have Shadow Lynx before Kitone. On Shadow Lynx's turn, you can move her to this square right here, and then do her illusion buff. Again, allowing Kitone to be aggressive on either side of the map. But just like in the TCG world, there are setups that you just can't beat using an aggro deck. So my advice when playing with this deck is to just have fun and don't take it too hard when you lose. But if you hate losing, especially to Lucia, here are some examples of decks that you can use. Victoria is a surprisingly evasive unit and works well in an evasion team. Plus she has the necessary tools to deal with ranged units. Ziza is a very powerful unit in match PvP. You'll mostly be using her for Steel Heart and Steel Time instead of damage, so you can use her as your Shiva holder. Or you can give her more Agi with secret orders. The Ifrit Esper will be useful for missile resistance and piercing attack, while the Tetra Esper is useful for wind resistance and evasion. If you don't have Victoria, you can also switch Narshe to the Dragoon sub. And with Ayaka as your support unit and Shiva holder, you can keep both units alive. In this matchup, you're going to want to play more conservatively with Kitone. You should be leading with your Dragoon units, and you should use Ziza to zone out Lucia, or your Ayaka to help your Dragoon with the initial push. And that's it for my Ultimate Kitone review. I hope this information was helpful and persuasive in showing that Kitone is a good long-term investment of your time and resources. This is my first Ultimate review, so please leave your comments below if you have any comments or suggestions on how I can make it better. If you're interested in watching more Ultimate reviews of units, then please consider subscribing to the channel and liking this video. May the pools be with you, and see you next time.